Hey everybody, welcome, welcome. As people are fanning in, this is my first time presenting in the saxophone group. And just to kind of get a general idea about, kind of where everybody's from, if you could just post in the comments, where you're located right now, what state you at, or maybe state you're in, or maybe you're overseas, either way, it'd just be great to kind of see where everybody's from. Cincinnati, very cool. I'm in upstate New York right now. Welcome, welcome as people are fanning in. Australia, whoa. Yeah, it's late over there. Thank you so much, Nikki, for hopping on here. We got Texas, Louisiana, another person from Texas, New York City, Grand Rapids, Michigan. You guys just got hit with a ton of snow. Well, cool. We're kind of all over the place here. So I think that's everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm super excited to be here with everybody and present to you on musician health and wellness. This is something that's been a prominent factor in my life. So today we're going to focus on holistic performing as opposed or with the perspective of saxophone performance. So before we dive in, just a kind of a general thing of what we're going to go over today. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about who I am, what I do, and how I got down this path. Basically, we're going to talk about performance related injuries, what they are, how they happen, and how they relate to specific saxophonists. And then we'll look at what we can actually do about it. So we'll be looking at 4 pillars to performing surrounding pain, or surrounding performing without pain. And if you have any questions along the way, for those of you in the Zoom, go ahead and comment in the chat as they come up, and I'll make sure to save some time at the end for Q&A. If you're watching the live stream, go ahead and comment in the Facebook group. Nathan is watching, and he'll let me know if anybody has any questions on that end. So a little bit about myself. So I'm finishing up my doctorate at Indiana University, and I'm 30, and I've been in school basically all of my life. So I got my undergrad at Carthage College for 4 years. Then I went to IU for a master's degree, and this was all in tenor trombone. And then I went and did a performance diploma for a year and a half on bass trombone. And then I decided to pursue a doctorate. And along the way, I basically entered a 3-year debilitating injury cycle. That first month and a half after I switched to bass trombone, I started getting a lot of tingling, tightness, some numbness in my left forearm. And me being very athletic, I was prioritizing my health and wellness. I was going to the gym basically every day. Um, I was like, well, you know what? Like, it's just a sign. I'll push through it a little bit. It's okay. Nothing to worry about. But I was having like 8 to 10 hour practice days, and I'm not too familiar with saxophone in the sense I don't know how much you guys practice, but 6 to 8 hours for a brass player, just lip wise, is pretty intense. And I was just in jazz band one day. I was sitting there. I wasn't playing anything too strenuous, and next thing I know, I blew out my forearm and I actually had to leave the room. I was crying because it hurt so bad I couldn't lift anything. So, as you can imagine, I just started a degree. I just started a performance diploma that I planned to be there for 2 years. So I'm like, oh my god, like, what am I gonna do? Like, I got to figure this out. So I did some Feldenkrais, I did some Alexander technique. I went to a PT. I went to can't tell you how many doctors I went through too, and I went through some body mapping, and ultimately things weren't going away. I was able to get over my forearm, but I ended up injuring my shoulder shortly after. I ended up developing huge scapula knots in my back and other knots around my back as well. And I had a lot of neck pain as well. And these things kept coming back. And it wasn't until my first doctoral recital at Indiana University, where a week before, I injured my back again doing something. I wasn't even lifting. I think I was just doing what I normally do. And the recital wasn't great. I ended up failing that recital. I couldn't take a breath without feeling pain. I couldn't lift my horn without feeling pain. And I still have the video. And every time I go back, I just kind of live in that moment a little bit. And it's pretty scary to kind of re-experience that. But basically, along my path, I was like, well, I got to do something. I'm probably going to quit school. I keep injuring myself, and I was just being realistic and also a little pessimistic. So I started gaining some health and wellness certifications just as a side career option because I didn't want to drop out of school, with no, side hustles or no side skills. So, I was pursuing a personal training certificate with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I went to go on to get a corrective exercise specialization with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And then I've always been interested in nutrition. I always ate well. I just wanted to have the science of why I ate well. So I decided to get that certification. And along the way, I also got a functional movement systems, and that's more mobility assessment based practices. And I started applying these things to myself because I'm a huge believer in action taking and information gathering. And I'll definitely talk about that a little bit later. But I started getting better actually very, very quickly. And in the span of 2 months, I was actually able to get back to a point where this pain just wasn't an everyday factor. It wasn't debilitating my life. And at the same time, I was kicking myself like, why aren't schools teaching this? Like, why did I have to go through this traumatic injury to really learn how to deal with this type of thing? Um, and along the way, actually, I just had my 3-year anniversary of being injury and pain free a couple weeks ago on January 26th. So all this led me to kind of open up the functional musician, and we opened up shortly after COVID happened, and we've had some incredible results with some other people as well who have experienced pain for years and years and years. In the span of 90 days, we taught them the process, which could be different for anyone. It could take 6 months, but everybody has been seeing really, really great results in under 90 days, which is really reassuring. And I think I stumbled onto something great here. So before we kind of dive into what that looks like, though, let's take a look at exactly what performance related injuries are. And I just want to throw this out that there's no standard definition, but I really resonate with this one by a study posted by Ackerman in 2012. And she defines performance related injury as any pain, any weakness, any numbness or tingling or physical symptoms that interfere with your ability to play your instrument at the level to which you are accustomed. And just to put that in my own words, I'd also throw in there the ability to interfere with your ability to play your instrument at your highest level. Okay. And for the case of today, performance related injury, PRI, and performance related muscular disorders, they're just going to be interchangeable just for the sake of today. So, how common are they? We're going to take a look at playing related injuries and posture among saxophonists, a study that was published actually back in December 2019. So, this is very, very recent, I think very applicable to our conversation today. And basically, an online questionnaire was used to collect data from professional and college level saxophonists throughout North America. And basically, 109 responded. And as you can see here, I won't read the data, I'll just give you a second here to look at it. But performance related injuries are very, very common amongst collegiate and professional saxophonists. And the common spots that they found, no surprise, I was just talking to Nathan about this: rounded shoulders, forward head. You have your backward pelvic tilt, which places huge stress on the lower back if you've ever had lower back pain. And, as a saxophonist too, like right wrist, your left wrist, mouth and jaw, and neck pain are very common spots as well. So the big conclusion that this study had was that saxophonists do have a high rate of performance-related injury in the wrist, the neck, and the mouth and jaw. And I want to highlight this last sentence because this is kind of what we're going to go off on a tangent and go into more of a sports science realm. But certain posture habits may contribute to higher pain ratings or performance-related injury locations within saxophonists. And me being a certified personal trainer and corrective exercise specialist, I'm actually going to bridge that gap a little bit and say posture habits definitely have higher contribute to higher pain ratings. I'm going to show you that why it's not something I'm saying, but rather research and evidence based. So I apologize for all the text. I normally don't do this with presentations, but I am taking these quotes directly from these studies. And they're really, really important just to kind of bridge this connection. And I just posted an Instagram video about this, but basically posture affects and moderates every physiological function, from your breathing to spinal pain to your mood to your pulse. So if you're in a high pressure performance situation, that's going to elevate the amount of performance anxiety and adrenaline pumping through your body. It's also going to affect the amount of lung capacity and the function of your lung capacity as you are performing. So, as a brass player, as a saxophonist, as a flute player, or whatever wind instrument you play, posture has a direct correlation on your lung capacity, your lung function, and if you're in a high pressure performance situation, your pulse. And along those lines, according to the National Academy of Sports Medicine, overuse injuries are any type of muscular or joint injury caused by repetitive stress. And musicians are athletes in the sense where we're endurance athletes. We need to play our instrument for long periods of time. We're a repetitive motion. And for that, I'm saying we are athletes in that sense, and we are prone to overuse injuries, such as tendonitis, carpal tunnel, bursitis, or even stress fractures. So let's look at the National Academy Sports Medicine injury cycle. Okay, this is a little bit complicated just kind of looking at it, but let's say you're practicing, you wake up one day and you practice, and then you have another practice session and maybe another practice session. Because I know saxophonists at Indiana University, they were practicing just all the time. So let's say you're in that fifth, sixth hour, you start feeling a little tension, you start feeling a little pain. You're like, cool, I'll practice through it a little bit just to get past this last etude or excerpt, and then I'll put it away. You come back the next day, that tension or pain is still there, but it's your morning routine. So what are you going to do? Are you going to put your saxophone away because you have a performance later and rest? No, you have a performance later. You're gonna work through that a little bit. So you find a way to make that work. And this is where the repetitive stress injury happens. Your muscles are exhausted. Your body is saying, "Hey, I need a little TLC. I need some rest. Help me out here. I did. Yeah, I'm sending you some signs." And that's going to result in a little tissue trauma. You're working those muscles past the point of exhaustion. They're already sending you signs. And if you look at the cumulative injury cycle, that's the upper left, tissue trauma. And as you continue practicing that, the tension may increase. It may lead to pain. It may lead to your tendons becoming a little inflamed, feeling a little bit sensitive, feeling a little sore. Maybe you feel a little sharp pain or a little warmness or tingliness after you put your saxophone away. This is going to lead to something called muscle spasms. If you've ever been sitting there in class or sitting there on Zoom and your muscles just kind of start feeling a little weak or just start spasming, they say like, oh, you don't have enough potassium, but that's also a muscle spasm. And as you continue not giving your body rest and continuing practicing to exhaustion and fatigue, adhesions happen. And basically, adhesions are these like, imagine if you're like going on this highway or this road, and then there's like an intersection. It's like the intersection between muscle points. It's called Davy's Law. And basically, it's a muscle knot. Those big, huge muscle knots, you go to a massage therapist, and the massage therapist is like, all right, like, I better see you next week and the week after and the week after because these muscle knots are so big. Like, it's going to take some time. And those muscle adhesions, those muscle knots actually alter your body's mechanics. So, for example, we're in the 21st century, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So, we've all sat down for long, 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 long periods of time. And I can't see everybody because everybody's camera's off, but I know we've all sat down for long periods of time. We've gotten up and our lower back hurts, or hamstrings feel tight, or when we're sitting down, our butt literally hurts. I was actually just in a 24-hour car ride from Florida back up to New York, returning to my home state. And, my butt was just killing me by the end of those 2 days. And if you sit down for long periods of time, this is just an example, your butt will literally send a signal to your brain and be like, hey, like, actually, I don't need to work as much. I'm in a relaxed state right now. But when you get up, your glutes aren't going to send that signal to the brain, be like, okay, turn me on again. They're just going to be in that relaxed state. And your body is a magnificent machine where if you want it to do a movement, it's going to figure out a way to do it. Now, whether that's a healthy movement or a faulty movement or something that can hurt your body, that's out of its control. It just wants to get the job done. And as a result, since the glutes aren't doing their primary function, it's going to go to other different areas, AKA your hamstrings, which is why they may feel tight, or your lower back. And your lower back is not designed to take on that role. And as we talk about the pelvic tilt, that is totally what I'm talking about. And in terms of the next stage of the injury cycle, that's going to result in some muscle imbalances because your body's working in a very inefficient way. And as you continue to move inefficiently, it's just this constant cycle of adaptation of your body that basically continues the cycle over and over again. So it all started with my forearm, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was in my back and in my lower back and in my spine. And because I didn't get that root cause, this cycle kept going on and on and on for 3 years. But what's really, really cool is that whenever one of my clients that I work with or worked with in the past have broken this cycle, that's when they start making improvements and the pain starts to dissipate and go away. But step one is even being aware that there is an injury cycle. This isn't something we're taught in music school. And so just kind of ask yourself, like, listening to this, like, am I on this injury cycle? Because if you are, that's the first step to getting out of it. All right. So, a couple of warning signs that you're in the injury cycle or you're going down the path towards overuse. You can have tension or pain while you play. It could be tingliness, tightness, or random spouts of dull or sharp pain. Muscle shaking while you're holding your saxophone up. You could have these muscle knots, which are huge, or you could have postural imbalances. For example, rounded shoulders or forward head, especially in the 21st century. Musicians aside, rounded shoulders wreak havoc on our society, and I wish I could fix it. I can't fix everybody, but those postural imbalances do really greatly affect the functionality of the spine and the longevity of your spine as well. And we'll take a look at a little bit more of what that looks like as saxophonists here in a little bit. Some common factors taken from the National Academy of Sports Medicine. These are all going to play a role in the amount of tension, the amount of pain, or your level of injury risk. And it's important that, there is tension, pain, or injury. There's no one root cause. It's the accumulation of a lot of different habits, and they could all be contributing in their own unique way. And even if they're only contributing 5 or 10%, takes 10, that in that case, it'll take 10 habits to get injured. And 10 habits, if you're not aware of them, can sneak in rather quite quickly. And the one of those being posture. Posture 100% matters. And depending on which type of saxophone you play, that's totally going to play a role in too. The alto sax is not as heavy as the bari sax, and vice versa. If you're playing a bari sax and you have that rounded shoulders and forward head, you're placing an extreme load on your spine, and that's going to directly increase the amount of time or it's going to decrease the amount of time you have until you start experiencing detrimental tension and pain. And of course, you have your day playing time, your sedentary level, your fitness level, as well as your daily habits, which we'll talk about in a minute, as well as your body mass index. All right. So what can we do about it? These things I was never taught when I was a musician in any collegiate setting. And I just want to encourage everybody to be proactive in your health and wellness. We really have to do ourselves a service of educating and continuing to re-educate ourselves outside of education, outside of academia, conservatories, or even outside of your professional life, because your health and wellness is going to have a direct influence on your performance, on your energy levels throughout the day, on your mood, and more importantly, the sustainability of your career. So if you want to be one of those people that plays saxophone until they're 95, which good for you, that would be amazing. You're going to be someone who wants to prioritize your health and wellness and be proactive in that. The second thing I would say is never practice into the pain. If you're experiencing pain, your body's sending you signals. We have to start becoming aware and listen to our body so we can start to either take breaks or react in a different proactive way. And then the other things, you really do want to be honest with yourself and practice in front of a mirror. How is your posture now that you're aware of this injury cycle and all of these other postural habits that could be sneaking in? How are you holding yourself? If you're experiencing neck pain and you look in the mirror and your neck is forward and you don't do anything about it, are you going to expect things to change? All right. And last but not least, don't be scared to ask for help. Part of educating ourselves is we go to people, we go to teachers, we go to private lessons to get better. And there are there are so many health and wellness people out there that can just help you and educate you a little bit more than what we were taught in academia. And it doesn't even have to be one-on-one lessons. You can go to a workshop. I know, if for those of you that have heard of Jeremy Wilson, he's a trombonist that's doing really great creative things in the musician health and wellness field. He has something called the the body, mind, spirit workshop, where he kind of connects those three into practicing. And that's just one of the ways you can kind of like expand on that education and just kind of invest in your health and wellness that's literally going to support you for the rest of your life. All right. So I love to talk. I've had too much coffee today. So we're just going to take a big old breath. Oh, if anybody has any questions so far, I kind of went through and sped through that a little bit. So go ahead and type in any questions and just kind of reflect and review upon that. But as we do, I'm going to talk of 4 pillars of performing without pain. And this is one of the key pillars in my program. And it's really, really important to know that everybody's going to be at a different situation in their life. Everybody's going to have different circumstances. And just like with your performance, there are certain areas where you're probably going to want to focus more on. And being honest with yourself, you need to focus on. So I want everybody to just come with this with an open mind, and don't be like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this pillar. I'm going to do this pillar. I'm going to do this pillar. Rather take a step back and just pick one area, whether it's environment, body awareness, posture alignment, or mindfulness and mindset that you can take away and start educating yourself on and start integrating into your life so you can start to build these different pillars that support a life with performing out pain. And throughout your life too, what's really cool is that these four pillars, they all go hand in hand, but at different points in your life, you may need to focus on environment more than you need to focus on postural alignment. At other points, you may need to focus on mindset more than you need to focus on body awareness. That's why I only say choose one. And just keep that in mind that this is like a long term growth, sustainability perspective that, we're approaching this with. So, let's dive into a little bit of environment. And environment is more just about our external surroundings, but it's about your habits internally too. This includes your sleep, hydration, nutrition, your level of activity, chronic sensitivity, and your practice habits and your technique. And just to kind of give you like a basic overview of like which one each one is, sleep is the most fundamental important health and wellness habit. If you're someone who's practicing 4 to 6 hours a day, if you're learning new repertoire, if you're trying to memorize stuff, if you're constantly getting out of your comfort zone with very technically demanding and challenging work, prioritizing your sleep is going to be very beneficial to you in a lot of ways. Not only does deep practice really just drain our mental resources and our physical resources, but your brain needs to process everything you're learning. And by prioritizing that sleep, you can actually increase the amount of short term to long term memory processes in your brain. So you're learning quicker. You can learn etudes quicker. You can sight read and learn sight reading quicker. You can learn these skills at a quicker rate if you're prioritizing your sleep. And if you just kind of think about it from a broad overview, like if you neglect sleep, I don't know if anybody out there has ever experienced an all nighter, but I would venture to guess that that next day, or maybe even next day or two, was not as productive as you wanted. And that's because sleep literally has a ripple effect through our entire life with every single habit. And that's why it's number one. And that's why I believe it's the most important health and wellness foundation that we can have. And the second thing to consider too is hydration. Even if our body's 2% dehydrated, 2%, our body is going to work harder to move the blood and oxygen throughout the body. Since it's working harder, the levels of oxygens are going to be a little lower than if you were hydrated. Because you're dehydrating, your body's working harder, you're going to have less endurance in your joints and your muscles when you're playing the saxophone, which means you may start to experience tension or pain quicker. And when you're dehydrated, I don't know if this is applicable to woodwinds, but for brass players, hydration has a direct correlation to how the chops feel when you're playing. When you're hydrated, your chops feel supple, they feel loose, they feel relaxed, they feel responsive. But if they're dehydrated, they feel a little blocky. The blood isn't rushing there to restore all of the energy that was depleted during your practice session. So again, I don't know if that's applicable. Play around with that and experiment and see if that works for you. Um, and something else to consider about hydration too, when we're sleeping, we're not actively drinking water while we sleep. So theoretically, if you're prioritizing hydration, when you wake up in the morning, theoretically, that should be the most dehydrated state you are in for the entire day. And if you're going to bed dehydrated, you wake up even more dehydrated. So if you wake up feeling like you're hungover and you haven't drinking any alcohol in a long time, that's a sign you're chronically dehydrated. If your urine is really, really yellow, again, sign that you're chronically dehydrated. And these all do tie together. And I don't want to lecture about hydration, so I'll definitely leave it at that. So let's skip over nutrition. I just want to talk about chronic sensitivity, and this can literally apply to so many different areas. But let's say someone in the group, let's say Nick, he plays Barry sax, went over to his friend's Becky's house, and he's never been to Becky's house before, but Becky has four cats. And he kind of goes in, he's like, oh, hey, Becky, good to see you. They're social distancing and everything. But right away, even while wearing a mask, he smells cat urine because, Becky has four cats. It's a small place. And that smell can be, that smells hard to get off, get away from the house. And he's like, they hang out for about 10-15 minutes, and then he's like, Becky, like, just to be honest, like the cat urine smell is getting me to a little bit. Do you mind if we, like, let's go grab some food or go grab a drink or come over to my place? And she's like, well, actually, I didn't even notice that smell. I've lived here for a couple years, but I guess I just got used to it. And that is what chronic sensitivity is, or technically it'd be chronic insensitivity. And we can do the same thing with our body too. The more we ignore these signs, our body's telling us like, oh, hey, I have tension here, I have pain here, this sharp pain here, and we just push through the practice and decide to focus on other things. We're actually teaching ourselves to ignore those. And we teach our body that we're teaching our body um, oh shoot, sorry, I lost my train of thought. We're teaching our body to not being able to recognize what state it's actually in. And going to hydration, like many people don't think they're dehydrated just simply because they're used to the concept of being hydrated. And again, with a lot of my clients, when I'm like, cool, we're focusing on hydration the next couple of weeks, after a couple of weeks of being hydrated, their body starts to crave water. They start to recognize those signs again that they've suppressed in their mind and their body, and they're able to recognize and react to whether or not they are dehydrated and hydrated. And again, these all go together, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like from a body sense. But this is something where this chronic sensitivity slash insensitivity plays a huge role in the environment of our daily foundational health and wellness habits. So let's talk a little bit about body awareness. And body awareness is really about the ability to recognize where tension and pain is throughout the body. If we just did a little self check right now, how are we sitting? Our hips aligned? Are we sitting up not nice and straight, quote unquote, but are we sitting up nice and aligned with our chest nice and out, or are our shoulders kind of rounding forward? Are we kind of hunched over? Are we feeling any tension in our body? Maybe you've been sitting down all day like I have, and your butt feels a little bit sore, or maybe your upper back is starting to feel a little bit of tension and pain because you've been rounding for a couple of hours. This goes into being able to recognize that tension and pain. And when I talk to students, music students about this, the question I always ask is, you know, um, when you go into a lesson, does your teacher ever tell you your shoulders raising, or that your wrist is in a weird position, or your neck's coming forward, saxophonists, or your shoulders rounding? And if you're unable to recognize that and check in with your body, that's a sign that we have some work to do. Because those are things you should be aware of yourself and be able to just kind of check in with yourself on a daily basis, even outside the practice room, just to kind of touch base with your posture. Because if you don't, that posture, gravity is going to win and eventually pull your body down, resulting in more tension and pain if you have that rounded shoulder slash forward head posture. So going back to body awareness, there are a lot of different stages. So we have like technically five different things here. And besides being able to recognize, it's also the ability to listen to your body and recognize its needs and communication. Just like that chronic insensitivity to hydration, we want to be able to recognize the signs our body's saying. And oftentimes our body may be saying, hey, I need to do some squats. Hey, I need to do some stretching. Hey, I need to do some yoga. Hey, I need a little bit TLC in my upper back. If you can recognize that, you're going to be able to react proactively and prevent these things from adding and building on. And last but not least, it's also the ability to release tension or pain throughout the body. We don't have to rely on massage therapists. You don't have to go to hours and hours of Alexander technique and Feldenkrais. However, that definitely will help with your level of body awareness. But we don't have to rely on doctors and specialists to help us release that tension or pain throughout the body. Actually, you should be able to do that yourself. That's a skill that you need to teach yourself. And going back to that education in the 21st century, that's one of those skills the musicians need if we're focusing on performing, until we're 80 all the way up to 95. And some examples, if you're like, oh, Austin, I really want to focus on body awareness, but I don't I don't know where to go. Well, number one, I post Mobility Monday every day, or not every day, every Monday on Instagram. So the_functional_musician on Instagram. So definitely give me a follow to check those out. You can also go out and take some Alexander techniques, some body mapping. You can do some yoga. Yoga for All Musicians is doing great work in building community, and all of those girls are sweethearts. Like, definitely go check them out. And you could also practice some Pilates and other movement practices. But the one commonality factor amongst all of these body awareness things is we're moving. The body was designed to move. If you think about millions of years ago, or whenever you think humans came on this earth, our bodies were designed to move on a daily basis. And in the 21st century, where we're at the computer, especially during a pandemic, we're actually playing against our biological needs as humans. So this is one of those things that's pretty non-negotiable. If you have a lot of tension and pain in your body, and you ask yourself, like, when's the last time I've actually moved? That could point you in the right direction. So last but not least, body awareness is something that is applicable both on and away from the instrument. If you think about it, again, I don't know how much everybody practices, but let's say Becky was practicing 4 hours, and I'm just pulling these names out of the head. I don't know why I'm like obsessed with that Becky name, but basically Becky pulled or practices 4 hours a day. Well, if she's sleeping 8 hours a day, that's 12 other hours in the day where she's, doing daily activities. How is her posture then? because if her posture in those other 12 hours outside of practice, it's not enough to go to your practicing the saxophone and have this great posture if right outside the practice room you instantly go to rounded shoulders and a forward head. And if you think about it, that's like having two different habits and constantly going back and forth. You're going to constantly be thinking about that, taking away mental energy and getting frustrated because you're like, oh, I have this tension and pain, but I have good posture when I play the saxophone. So at that point, like ask yourself, like, how's my posture away from the saxophone? Do I go home and watch Netflix 4 hours every night before I go to bed, just sitting in the same slunched posture? Or am I getting up and moving every 45 minutes just to make sure that my body's being functional and aligned and all that tension and pain isn't building up? And those are really important questions. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that towards the end when we have our Q&A. So let's talk about postural alignment. And this one's huge. And I'm talking about rounded shoulders and forward head. And honestly, I just pulled a random picture off of Google. First one I found actually is the one on the left. But the one on the left and the picture all the way on the right, there are some similarities. Going back to the purpose of the human body, one of the purposes is to resist gravity. We're holding ourselves up. We need muscles to resist gravity. And as you play an instrument, that adds a load. That adds a load. And as your muscles fatigue, like I said, your body is going to find a way to hold up that instrument, whether it's a good functional foundation or not. And as you can see, the body adjusted to the forward shoulders and forward head to the left. And I actually looked at I looked a little bit, I forget who the name is. So I apologize to you saxophone aficionados out there. But basically, I looked at his posture earlier in his career, and earlier in his career, it actually looked great. It looked much like the girl in the blue shirt. But if you don't have those muscles, if you're going in those misaligned, faulty movement postural patterns, eventually gravity is going to win. And if you just look at the manipulation, not the manipulation, but the adaptation of the spine over time, the girl in the blue shirt is approximately 40 and 50. And then as the girls increase in age, that spine manipulates and eventually curves at the top. And if you've been to, I'm sorry, I keep saying we all, actually, I mean, if you've ever been to like a regional orchestra concert or an orchestra concert or a community band concert, you can easily point out the people who have that posture all the way on the right. And I know some people in that posture, and sometimes the pain is so excruciating in the upper back, they resort to pain meds, they resort to alcohol, they resort to medical marijuana, and they also resort to sleeping for prolonged periods of time and just stop doing daily activities just because they're in so much pain. They have to lay down, they have to take a nap, they can't deal with it. And if you're just thinking long term here, no one should no one should be like that. That's a lot of pain. That's going to result in surgery. That's going to result in thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of medical appointments. If you're getting pain medication, that's also very expensive as well. So these are things we want to start considering. And, this isn't one of those things where it's like, oh, you have rounded shoulders, like you're going to have tension and pain tomorrow. But it's important to recognize that this is a lifetime thing. The longer you are in this position, the more load you place upon your body. In his case, a tenor sax, which is pretty heavy, the quicker your spine is going to adapt to that load, if that makes sense, if you follow that. So some other alignment faults too. We talked about that pelvic tilt. That is the second picture, the lumbar lordosis. And that's where the glutes aren't properly activating, your core isn't properly activating. So guess what's taking up the bulk of the load to support your entire upper body? Your lower back. Now, if you imagine walking like that because your glutes aren't activated, guess what takes up that load again? Your lower back. And oftentimes this results in instant lower back pain. And I forget the statistic, but lower back pain in the United States is at a all-time high. And those what was I thinking of? Those postural tools, those postural belts, they are only short-term solutions. Your body actually needs the muscles. It needs to be properly activated in order to have that posture all the way on the right. And you may look at the right and be like, oh, that looks really, really athletic. But in order to be athletic, you pretty much have to have an aligned posture. Or else when you go under load, when you're Pat Mahomes and you're throwing a 70-yard touchdown pass in the Super Bowl to Travis Kelsey, who, fantasy football, let's go. You need to have that perfect form, or that 70-yard pass isn't going to hurt, and you're going to increase your chance of injury. And as you can see, like, if we go to the forward head, even with the forward head, if you have a tenor sax or a bari sax in front of you, that is so heavy. Your neck, which already weighs 12 pounds, that's going to provide a lot of load on your spine and eventually alter it to look like the middle of thoracic kyphosis, which is eventually going to cause a lot more tension pain and increase your chance of injury. So the last thing I want to talk about is mindset and mindfulness. And this is something I was actually talking about with Nathan before our call. And a lot of times when we have tension, pain, or injury, um, it's just so mentally debilitating. One of the reasons why I was in a 3-year injury cycle was because I kept getting in my own way. I was like, there were times where, my doubts, my fears, and my limiting beliefs were just so controlling and manipulative of my reality that I started to believe it. I started to believe I was injured. I started to believe I wasn't fixable. I started to believe I wasn't worth it. I started to believe, like, you know what? I need to go down a different path. And when you're in an environment that's really competitive, like music, it can also be very debilitating when other people um, who usually ask you to do certain gigs don't because you're injured. That can really start playing at your mindset. So, I want to encourage everybody who's going through this just to remember, like, process over results. Even if you're like trying to improve on the saxophone, it's not about tying emotional bias to results, but it's about trusting the process of improving. Because just like with getting over tension, pain, or injury and improving on the saxophone, growth is never linear. If anything, it's like it's like GameStop in the stock market right now. It's going up, it's going down, it's going up, it's going down, and it keeps going. And hopefully, GameStop does continue to grow, not because I have GameStop stock, but because I like video games. But the same thing applies to us. And this idea of a fixed mindset versus I'm broken, I can't be fixed, which versus a growth mindset, which is I'm going through an injury, but I'll figure this out. Those are two very different mindsets, and one's going to help you grow and ultimately get to your destination, whether it's be a saxophone performance wizard or a studio teacher or a freelance musician, whatever the case may be. Just think about that end result, because no matter what stage of life you're in, you're always going to have those doubts, those fears, or limiting beliefs. If, for those of you who are going to go into auditions, having those fears of what if I'm not good enough? Did I prepare enough? What if there are people better than me? How are those supporting your growth? How are those supporting you showing up during those moments? Because I would argue that they're just taking mental space. If you can let those go and replace them with thoughts and effective tools that actually help you grow and help you be in the present and help you really just perform your best, that's actually going to help you more than all of these negative mindsets that are associated with being injured. Because the truth is, even if you're injured, you're not broken. A lot of doctors don't understand what you're going through. But don't blame them. We got to take accountability. We got to re-educate ourselves, and we have to move forward. And I promise you, if I can get past that injury, so can you. So again, this isn't to like spread fear about performance related injuries. It's just simply show the reality that's been covered up for such a long time. Academia doesn't want you to think about this. There are certain professors who thinks this is an absolute hoax, but that's not true because we have studies to prove otherwise. So anyway, going back to like those applicable things, like Austin, like I want to work on my mindfulness and mindset. Like, what do I do? I would highly recommend checking out breath work. Not only because breath work is going to help you with your mindset and your mindfulness, it helps you really uncover what you've suppressed over the years. It helps you let go of it. And breath work, you're literally deep breathing for like half an hour. So the days after I do breath work, bass trombone is the easiest instrument I've ever played. So as saxophonist, if you're someone who struggles with your breath or your breath support, practicing breath work, you can literally kill 3 birds with 1 stone: mindfulness, mindset, and your breathing. I would also highly recommend daily meditation. This is something that I've been experimenting with. Obviously, meditation is a practice. It's a language. It requires you to consistently show up, even on the days you can't pronounce cumpleaños and you say cumpleaños and really offend somebody in your Spanish class. You got to keep showing up for yourself. And even if it's the worst meditation in the world, you're still giving your body and your mind a chance to figure it out. And I'm not a meditation teacher by any means, but it's something I'm working on, a certification for daily meditation, but it's something that's really like been a game changer for me, for someone who overthinks everything. So if I don't do my meditation, I don't feel like my best self. I overthink. A lot of these thoughts tend to come back, but if I do, I'm able to let them go. I'm able to focus on my goals, and I actually have more energy throughout the day. As well as some other things you can work on too. You can journal your thoughts. You can do some gratitude work. You write down 5 things you're grateful for every day. And you can also fear journal, sitting in your fears. Like, I'm scared I'm never going to win a job. And I know it sounds weird, but by sitting in that emotion and writing it down and simply bathing in that for a couple of minutes, those thoughts lose its power. You write it down, and it exits your mind, and you find yourself not really thinking about it anymore. And it can be really liberating in a lot of ways. But again, everybody's different. You're going to have to find what works for you. But by showing up for yourself every day and focusing on one of these pillars, this is really going to help add sustainability to your career and just increase that ceiling of peak performance that you are ultimately trying to get to on a day-to-day basis. So there you have it, the 4 pillars. We have environment, we have body awareness, we have postural alignment, and we have mindfulness and mindset. So thank you so much for listening. I know that was a lot of information, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this presentation and look if there are any questions. If there's any questions on Facebook, for those of you watching the live, feel free to comment in the comment section, and Nathan will let me know those questions. If you're someone who is looking for help and support, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also follow me on Instagram, the_functional_musician. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can also check out my website on www.thefunctionalmusician.com. So thank you again for listening. I'm going to try to get out of this since I'm on an iPad, and we'll go to some questions here. Yes. Okay. So right away, anything on possible dystonia issues. So that is exactly why I defined the performance-related injury at the beginning of the presentation. Dystonia is actually out of the realm of my scope of practice, because it is a neurological issue, and it's something I'm not trained in, nor do I feel comfortable with that. But I know Jan Kagris, if you Google her name, I'll actually post it in the comment section here. Jan Kagris, she has a musician health and wellness coaching company, and she has worked with a lot of brass players who go through focal dystonia issues and actually have helped them progress back to having a functional performing career. So I would highly recommend to check out her resource. I don't know how much her resource cost, but I know I would trust her for sure. So let's see what else we got here. Scoliosis, ? I think it's Carqui. Can you, would you mind asking or expanding on that a little bit with the scoliosis ? I'm not sure what you mean there. Healthiest types of regular fitness exercise to engage in while also practicing for large amounts of time. Any particular to avoid? Well, that's a great question. I think the important thing is movement. Any type of movement is better than no movement. However, if you're someone who has never experienced heavy weight training, like bodybuilding, and you're practicing 6 hours a day and you go out and you start lifting hundreds and hundreds of pounds, I'd probably advise against that. Generally, what we want to do is move well and then move often. And it's better to just kind of step your, like, I say, like, I'm a big, huge fan of jumping in the deep end and figuring something out. But when it comes to movement, taking baby steps and kind of figuring out, going to different people, different practices can really, really help. And I think as long as you're moving in a very aware way, something that helps you develop body awareness is really going to help you. And, for me, when I was going through my injury, I practiced yoga pretty regularly. It wasn't for me. It did not help me get out of my situation. But I know other people who, for example, the Yoga for All Musicians studio, it's a practice and they love it and it works for them, and that's fantastic. So there's really no right or wrong answer, but you do want to approach this from the fact that there are going to be healthy movements and there are going to be faulty movements, and there are definitely going to be certain practices that put you more at risk. If you're lifting 200 pounds above your head, that's a very risky practice, because if you don't have certain foundations set up in line, all it takes is one tweak and your shoulder is just injured for the, and that's a 3-month rehabilitation, possibly 6-month rehabilitation, depending on what instrument you play and what you want to do with that shoulder getting back to functional. So good question. I hope that answered your question. Um, Something that I wanted to talk about, Cindy, in my presentation is about neck straps. And part of that body awareness and that posture alignment is finding a neck strap that works for you. And it's going to be different for everybody. But generally, like when I talk about align, I generally like avoid the idea of like stand up straight. Because if I told you to stand up straight right now and you instantly go there, you're basically hyperextending your entire back. That's generally the consensus, unless you've had movement practices before. So generally, we want to be aligned. We want to have a neutral spine, and you want that neck strap to support that. You don't want the neck strap, whatever you're playing the neck strap, you don't want to have to move forward to make it work. For example, I have a client right now who plays Barry sax, and a big challenge for him has been to find a neck strap that allows him to be in this functional posture without coming forward with the Barry sax, because he's had a lot of back pain, he's had a lot of wrist pain from that. So he's still experimenting with finding something that works. Since I am not solely um, a saxophonist, I actually don't have any recommendations on the type of neck strap. However, what I can do is I can ask around and see if I can come up with a list. The only thing is everybody's going to be different. The important thing is to find a neck strap that allows you to be in that functional posture and be able to sit like that for long periods of time. And if you can find that, then that's the neck strap that's right for you. But honestly, there's really no right answer for that. I've seen various people playing saxophone in a seating position, leaning towards the left side. Does that mean the spine is not in line, which could cause scoliosis? Well, scoliosis is one of those things, and again, I'm not a chiropractor, but if you imagine, like if I'm leaning to the left and I'm playing a saxophone, your spine is a little bit curved. The longer you're in that curve, the more muscle imbalances are going to have on the adaptation that your body's trying to make. So for example, if I'm just sitting here like during this presentation and I'm like this and I get up and I move around and I don't go to that pattern again, chances are it's probably not going to be a factor. But if I'm practicing 4 to 6 hours a day in this position, that could manipulate the muscles and also manipulate the spine in a way where it starts to gear towards the left. And it's actually funny you mentioned that, because I've seen with a lot of strength training courses, exercise programs, rehabilitation programs online, just from like coaches generally in like the fitness area, and this isn't for everybody, but generally like people will come to them and that where their spine is manipulated like this, and as they do more strength training and fix those muscle imbalances, their spine does start to straighten out. Now, I'm someone who actually was diagnosed with scoliosis in like 7th grade. I would argue it's probably because every time I got a Lego, I was on the floor rounding my shoulders in like a hunched over position. But as I strength trained and worked through that, my scoliosis has gotten less and less and less. Is that something I'll probably have to deal with the rest of my life? Yes. Is it going to be so much as a factor because I'm doing preventative things? Not as much. So they both kind of go in hand in hand. And if you think you have scoliosis, definitely go to a chiropractor and get checked out and get their medical opinion for sure.
Hey, Austin. I just have my camera and microphone, so I just decided to ask you this. Are there are there specific exercises that you would recommend? Because as you're talking about, with saxophone, it's very easy to be leaning forward and it's very easy to have rounded shoulders. Are there specific exercises you recommend to counterbalance that habit?
Yeah, so yes and no. You definitely want to be practicing a movement practice, and you know, there are exercises to counterbalance all of these things, and I'll actually do a mobility routine right after this, just to kind of, because I've been sitting down since 8 a.m. with some presentations and other stuff going on. But generally, like when we're rounding forward, our back muscles are becoming more extended, and doing more pulling exercises, core exercises, and exercises that bring awareness to where your shoulders lie on your back are going to be really valuable in counteracting all of those tendencies that our body has, because we're rounding forward. And generally with like a muscle, if we want to stretch a muscle, like if a muscle's tight, um, you stretch that muscle and then strengthen the other side. So it's like, my back is weak right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to align it, and then I'll do some back pulling exercises to strengthen those weakened muscles in the back. And then those back muscles will be able to support this posture without me having to actively be like, all right, got to go down and back. So generally, like pulling exercises are so good. And the core exercises, if you haven't worked out your core in like years and years and years, this is something where a braced core, 2 out of 10 on your effort is going to help keep that bottom spine neutral and kind of help your upper body lay on top of that braced neutral position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I've seen you doing some demonstrations on your Instagram page of just of these kind of things, because I I I think it's very easy without paying attention to it. Like even when you're sitting in your chair, like I found myself when you're talking about sitting up, I'm like, oh yeah, I need,
Yeah, and
I,
even when I was talking about it, I was like,
yeah, yeah.
cool, good
So
demonstration. I'm doing exactly what I'm telling people not to do.
right, right. Well, the camera. So, but it's just interesting because the awareness component of what you're talking about is so key, right? Like if you're not aware that you're even doing it, that habit is just gonna continue from there.
Yeah, and that really goes along with, anything. If you're trying to build any type of skill or improve, awareness is always that first step.
Right.
You can't fix your articulation if you don't recognize that, your articulation has room for improvement,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Um. Great. There are no other questions that I've seen, but if others have some in here, either unmute yourself and ask or type it in the chat. But
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say also, like, thank you so much for this. This is really wonderful information.
Of course. Yeah, happy to make this happen. Thank you so much for inviting me into your Facebook group. I hope people took something out of this. And something I forgot to do for those of you still listening, I asked you to pick out one pillar that you need to work on most. Just out of curiosity, could you comment in the comment section that one pillar you took away that you're going to start focusing on in your life? Just so I can kind of mentally gauge like what this ratio is for saxophonists. Mindfulness, love it. Anybody else still out there? Or is everybody taking a bathroom break? All right, well, cool. Well, oh, here we go. Environmental, postural alignment, body awareness. See, look at that. 4 different people, 4 different pillars. Amazing, amazing. Body awareness again, environmental. Yeah, it just goes to show everybody has something they're going to work on. Again, I think Nathan's posting this on YouTube, so if if you want to come back to this resource, it'll definitely be there for you. So Nathan, thank you so much again for having me. If anybody else has any other questions you think of and you want to shoot me a message, I'll more than happy to answer your question. Just let me know that you watched the presentation through Nathan's channel. That way I can just connect you with that.
All right. Thanks so much, Austin.
Thank you.
Bye bye.